Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Decision Hour. I'm Adam, and with me, as always, Half Pint. Half Pint, how are you?
Hey, Mr. Charles Ingalls.
I had to do it. Oh, goodness. Half Pint. That's awesome. And Charles Ingalls, wow. What was that show? Little House on the Prairie, right?
Yeah,
that's an old one. And we're kind of giving away what we're going to be talking about today, right? Not Little House on the Prairie, but kind of like that, though. Like
kind of,
homestead living, like old school. I like to call it old school living, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is, and it's not. Like, I know a lot of people now who homestead.
Even today.
Right.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, we both grew up in the Midwest, right? And my grandparents did a lot of kind of self, canning, and they had their own garden. I grew up hunting and fishing, and whatnot. So that, a lot of food came from that. I had aunts and uncles that had, chickens and pigs and, whole farm experience, and whatnot. So I was fortunate enough to see some of it. I didn't live on a farm myself. We kind of lived in the town, it wasn't really a city, but it was a town, because there was only like 500 people in the town at the time. I think there's like maybe 1,000 people in there now after 30 years. So, but homestead living. Let's just jump right into this. What are you familiar with, or what do you remember? Because you've done some homestead living yourself, right?
I have. Yeah. So it all started out when I was pretty young. I didn't tell you this before, Adam.
Of course not, because that's.
So when I was growing up, we lived in a house in the country on 5 acres, and my parents had horses, and we had like a little vineyard area, and we had a few vegetables, nothing huge, not a big garden, and then once I had married Ken and we lived in Bridgeport, we owned 30 acres of land. Wow. And had pretty much our own little homestead. We had a big garden, and we had some chickens and a turkey, and we had a lot of deer on our property that would come in. So we would have venison, and we did a lot of fishing, especially Ken. He did a lot of fishing. So for our meat, we would have, the eggs, the chickens, the venison, turkey. The kids had a couple rabbits that they would play with. And we had some geese, and I would can a lot of the vegetables in the garden, things like that. Yeah.
Wow. Mm-hmm. See, growing up, I used to watch my grandma. My grandma still, or she used to up until about last year. My sister's kind of taken it over, but she would can spaghetti sauce. She makes her own spaghetti sauce. And even like, last month when I was up in Wisconsin, like you go down in the basement and there's like in the laundry area, there's like shelves of just canned food. I also remember when I was a kid, pickles. We used to have a pickle patch when I was a kid. So we'd walk all the way up, and we had 230, 240 acres at the time. My grandparents did. And I remember as a kid, I'd ride my bike, up and down the hills, and we, in the winter we'd go sledding down the hills and stuff like that. But I remember walking in the back one time, and they didn't have it anymore at the time, but my grandma took me back there, and this is where their pickle patch was, and they did a lot of pickling. We still pickle. I pickle asparagus as even today.
Oh my goodness!
I like doing pickled asparagus. String beans?
So I have a question about the pickling.
Okay.
Does it make the food all taste the same? Like pickled asparagus, does it taste like dill pickles?
No. It gives no. I mean, you have it, and it depends on what type of seasoning and stuff that you do with it. Like I do mine a little bit differently. I'll put a bunch of dill, maybe an onion, a couple garlic cloves in there, and drop it in. There's like when I do like the string beans, I'll take a piece of raw bacon, like I'll cut a chunk of raw bacon. I'll put that at the bottom of the mason jar, and then I'll put the beans in, and then I'll pour the liquid in, and then can it or whatever. And
You don't pickle the beans.
I do. I'll even pickle
do?
them. Yeah, so at times. Sometimes I'll pickle the beans. Not always. I mean, I'll do regular canning too, because I can stuff too.
Yeah. So when I make,
but the pickling stuff, I love pickled asparagus. Like, I love pickled asparagus.
oh, you know what I love is you mentioned the green beans with the bacon.
Yeah.
That's totally.
And I like when I was living in Arizona before I sold the house, I used to pickle. It was not uncommon to see 5 or 6 jars of pickled asparagus or string beans or pickled beans or even pickled eggs. I'd pickled hard-boiled eggs. Yeah, oh, so good.
Oh, I
so
don't know.
good. Yeah, pickled eggs was another one, and mushrooms. My grandmother gave me a recipe for mushrooms, and
Like pickled mushrooms.
pickled mushrooms and canned mushrooms. I do them both. Like, I do the pickled ones, and I'd label those because those were just a nice treat to have, right? And then like the regular like mushrooms, I would use those for like spaghetti sauces. I'd use those for like Italian dishes, Asian food. I cook a lot of Asian cuisine and whatnot. And at the time I was doing a lot of Italian cuisine and stuff too, because I like to cook. So I would, because that stuff would stay a lot longer, So that's the one thing I like about canning and pickling, is that it keeps a lot longer than, hey, I'm going to put this, and then you have like 4 days to use it, otherwise it goes bad.
Yeah, and then you also know, like the canned stuff in the grocery store, you don't know who canned it, where it came from, what's the tin can gonna put off into your food, because we all know that can't be good for you.
Right.
So we also, when we lived in Bridgeport, Michigan, we had a huge apple orchard. So
Oh yeah.
I made a lot of applesauce and apple jam. And
Yeah, I literally downstairs in my refrigerator right now, I have 2 big things of applesauce, and I made, for the first time ever, I made apple butter this past October. So I was back for my brother's wedding last October, and we have an orchard on our hunting property, and then my grandparents, my mom's side, they have several apple trees on that property. And my grandfather picked like 200 apples, 200, and put them in this big thing. And I drove back. He knew I was driving, so he's like, "Hey, I'm going to send these home with you." He's like, "Do whatever you want." So I said I always wanted to make apple butter, right? Because I was like, it's not really butter, but I put them in a crock pot, and I let them bake down for like 8 hours, 9 hours, something like that. It was an all-day process. And usually you add like, sweeteners and sugar and stuff like that. I didn't add anything. I cut the apples up, and I added water, and I just let them do their thing. And it was the best apple butter I've ever had in my life. I'm obviously, I'm going to sound like I'm being biased here because it's like I made it, but no added sugar, nothing. I took some home for my grandmother to try. My grandmother, God, I love her, but she can be a little like, oh yeah, well, I said, my grandparents loved it. So she's like, how much sugar did you use in this? You can't have a lot of sugar because, you don't want to get diabetes and stuff. And I'm just like, I didn't add any sugar to it. She's like, that's really good. So, yeah, I love doing that kind of stuff, though. I love like the homes. I love gardening. I love being outdoors. I love to hunt and fish. I think that whole process of making it your own, and it is a process. It takes a lot of work to live that type of lifestyle, but when you're growing your own food, like, and it could be potatoes, we right now we have asparagus, every type of, blackberries, strawberries. I love raspberries. We have over 1,000 raspberry plants. Rhubarb.
Oh my word! I love rhubarb.
And like a lot of people don't know what rhubarb is. That's kind of a Midwest thing.
It's sad.
And like we make rhubarb crunch, we make rhubarb pie. I mean, it's rhubarb this, rhubarb that.
Rhubarb cake. Oh,
yeah, and I mean,
that's like my downfall.
And then we make our own breads and stuff too.
You know? That, like rhubarb bread and zucchini bread. Oh,
yeah.
My word.
Oh.
I'm so hungry right now.
I know, like you know, but I like doing that type of type of stuff. So if you're listening to the show, if you do any type of homestead living yourself, whether you can food or maybe you're kind of living off the grid, and I can kind of say we still do that now because the farmhouse where my grandparents live, no internet, no cable, and no cell phone service. Patty knows because I tell her where I'm going or when I have for emergency, so she knows when I'm up there, right? And like, I think you tried calling me once. I had to stand outside in the driveway. It's 10 degrees outside. I'm in like 7 layers of clothes and I'm holding the phone at a certain angle, and I got 2 minutes because the satellite, once it goes over, it's gone for a solid 2 minutes before I get a signal again.
He puts a tin hat on too.
People driving by, do you see that idiot standing outside there? What's he doing? So I have to drive 7 miles into the nearest town to get a decent cell service when I'm out there. And I love that. I consider that kind of living off the grid.
You know what else I love about homesteaders is you always find other homesteaders, right? So say we have all these extra apples from our orchard.
Oh, yeah.
And somebody else might have all these extra peaches. So you can like kind of swap.
I love that. My grandparents do that with the neighbors. Like the neighbors, you know, my grandparents in their upper 80s now and don't move around all that well. I'm not up there all the time, a couple times a year if I'm lucky. But during the winter months, like right now, it's 10 degrees. It's 2 degrees out this morning. It was like -7 with the windshield, and they had snow. They can't. My grandpa's not going to plow the driveway. He got rid of his tractor, so it's like the neighbor from up the road will bring the tractor down, plow their driveway, and in return, my grandparents they'll give them applesauce and like all these raspberry and stuff that they can, and that's kind of like their payment and stuff that they use, and the neighbors love it. And every time I go home and I see them, I always thank them, hey, thanks for watching out for my grandparents, blah blah blah. And they're like, I was like, it's a no brainer. Like your grandparents make the best, raspberry sauce or pies and stuff like that, but that's what you do, and that's kind of like that old school living. You don't see stuff like that really in like these big cities and stuff. You have to kind of go off grid. And that's like a bucket of, a bushel of apples is a form of payment to come, plow your driveway in the winter time or something like that. It's really neat.
Yeah. And, if you live in the city, you can do some kind of homesteading, usually, even if you have like a small porch. I did a lot of research about that too, because we went from country living, which I absolutely loved, the homey feeling and all that, to when Ken joined the military again, we went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and lived on post for the first year, which was crazy your neighbors right next door. But I still had like a small little yard, and I was still able to have like the, I had, what do you call it? The topsy-turvy, I think it was called. Do you remember those? You can still find those online, and you can like grow things in small areas.
I haven't heard one of those in a long time. It's been years since I've heard that.
Yep. You can have like, you can use, instead of potting flowers, you can pot like tomatoes strawberries.
And you can grow that stuff right in your house. And you can even get like the little stuff that you could put on your window ledge in your kitchen and stuff for like herbs, like mints and chives and stuff like that. And now I saw something online a couple months ago where they have like, you hang pictures in your house. They have things where they're called wall gardens.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and you have like you put them like, you could put them side by side. You can literally grow an entire garden on your wall.
Ooh, that's cool. I'm going to look that up.
Yeah, and I think that's what it's called. I believe it's called wall garden. You have to Google wall garden and check that out.
That's neat. The only thing is, I'm just thinking, is I painted my walls like an off-white color.
Yeah. Ugh. I would hate I think like dirt, and if it drained down or something like that, you'd think like moldy. attracting bugs, whatever. Let me ask you something. So the homestead living, did you guys, when you guys lived on the 30 acres, did you guys have to haul your own water? Or did you guys have a well?
We had well water.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was good. It was good water.
Yeah, I like well water too.
Yeah, we had well water. We had a septic tank. This was kind of cool. Like it was a little scary the first few months we were there because I had to get used to it. But there was something that was called a cistern. And all of the water, I think it's a cistern, all of the water from outside, not all of it, but a lot of water from outside drains into, it was a room in the back of our house where our laundry room was. Underneath the floor, you could open up the floor basically, and there would be a reserve of water down there. The whole thing was filled. It was probably about, I would think about 5 feet deep. So if there was like an emergency, you could
flip a switch and use that.
Right. Well, you don't flip the switch. You literally just go open it up and like you can get water out of it if you needed to.
Like buckets?
I guess.
Really?
We didn't use it. It just kind of like, I don't even know how it stayed fresh under there, but I
think that would be cool because I've seen people where they've created some type of system where it collects the runoff of rainwater and it goes into some type of filtration system that they use for a later date, or that's how they use a lot of their water. And I think that's a great idea. I think most homes should be doing that. Now.
It was neat. It was a tiny scary just because our kids were little.
Yeah.
So I was afraid that they were going to try to open it. I mean, they couldn't. We had it locked down and everything when we moved in. But that house, so here's the secret. That house used to be, it was Ken's parents' house, their first house. They built it out of, it was a horse stable in the beginning. It was a 4,000-foot horse stable.
Really?
They converted it into a house. Then they sold it, and we bought it from the people who they sold it 2 years ago because Ken knew the history. It was like part of the family when he was really little.
Cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. So I really miss it. It was a really neat place, but I don't miss the weather, and I do like city living now. I mean, it's very convenient.
City living's convenient. It's like one of those necessary evils, I think, sometimes with the job or the building an empire. It's hard to build an online business off grid.
Yeah, for sure. Especially radio talk.
Yeah, but I will say this: it's nice to always go back to take like a breather. When you need a break, you always have somewhere to go to, and that's where people are like, oh, how come you don't go to like the beach or do this or do that? I honestly prefer to just go home and unwind for 2 or 3 days and not do anything. Like this summer, I'm planning on going up there during the summer and do some fishing and stuff because I haven't fished up there for, I don't know, probably 5 years. I think was the last time I fished up there. And prior to that, it was like almost 15 years.
Wow.
So it's like, and I love, like that was my thing growing up. I'd come home from school and we always lived near water. We lived on a lake, or we were walking distance from a lake. I would throw my bags down, grab my fishing pole, and I'd go fish for like an hour or so. And then I'd have to come home before it was dark, because back then we didn't have cell phones and stuff like that. I know, crazy concept, people. We didn't have cell phones back in those days. And you'd have to be home before dark, and I'd bring my, usually I caught several fish, and I'd clean them, and Dad would help me put them in the freezer or whatever, and you had that as a meal. That was one of the meals one night. You know what I mean? I miss doing stuff like that, and now that I've gotten more seasoned, I've had my grandfather teach me more about the gardening side of it with all of it. It's therapeutic for him. We gave away 320 strawberry plants this year.
Wow, that's incredible.
I mean, we have 2 rows of them, and it's just we have a ton of it. And now my grandfather's like, it's just too much for me now. I'm just like, don't get rid of it. I'll come up. It gives me an excuse to drive home for a weekend, 15-hour drive, whatever.
My kids had little gardens. After we moved to Fort Bragg, then we moved to another little city called Rayford, North Carolina, when Ken was in the military. And we had some garden boxes set up on the side of our house. And so they learned how to grow green beans. But I was just thinking, like, even if you're in the city, they have the climbing green beans.
Mm-hmm.
And just for your information, in case you don't know, because you're Midwest and this does not happen in Michigan, we had tomatoes and the vines grew as tall as our house in North Carolina.
Wow.
In Michigan, they don't have an opportunity to grow that for that long of a time.
Right.
So, I mean, we even had, after Ken retired from the military, when we were in Michigan, we had a big garden back then too, like a 1/4 of an acre garden. But the tomatoes don't grow that like that in Michigan. But in North Carolina, oh my goodness, the vines were, I mean, like, we had so many tomatoes from like 3 tomato plants. It was insane.
Listen, I'm curious. Those of you that are listening to the show right now, let us know. Leave us a message on our Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/The Decision Hour, or send us an email at The Decision Hour, all one word, The Decision Hour @gmail.com. If you've done any type of homestead living, whether you grew up on it or you're currently doing homestead living, tell us about your experience with homestead living. What is it that you're doing? What are some of your, maybe some tips and stuff of what you're doing right now that we could share with the audience as well? Patty, we're coming up on time already. I could
Yes.
keep talking about homestead living, getting into the tractor, plowing the fields, doing, the whole nine. I miss it. I love it. I know you miss it. And it's kind of, it will definitely hold a special place in both of our hearts, seeing as we're both Midwest people. Any parting words to the listeners for today?
No, just, I mean, go have a good time. If you're a homesteader, keep enjoying that property because it's amazing, isn't it? And then if you're a city slicker and you still want to have a garden, there are opportunities that you can figure out how to do that. You really can. Yeah,
and I'm going to add something to that real quick. If you're a city slicker, having plants in your house, you can grow stuff in your house in pots and stuff. There are things that help, and that actually helps with fresh oxygen in the air in your house and stuff like that. So having plants and stuff like that, grow your own food. Period. Mm-hmm. Grow your own food. That's all the time that we have today, folks. Homesteading. We want to hear from you. Leave a comment on our Facebook page. Send us an email. Special thanks to Heroes Media Group, our network sponsor. Make sure you go check out all the other great shows and articles that are being put up on that. Love what they're doing over there. So go check them out at www.heroesmediagroup.com. For Patty, I'm Adam. You've been listening to The Decision Hour.